Hey guys, welcome back. 8byte Brian here, and thanks for tuning in again for another retro recap. Now this time I'm going to be taking a look at one of Atari's lines, but it's not going to be the one that you're thinking of. Now back in 1977, of course, Atari was pioneering the VCS and the Atari 2600 and reintroducing a line of video game home consoles to homeowners all over the world. Seeing as how the Pong systems were really starting to frustrate people at this time, Atari was mainstream at getting video games to become a part of normal culture. But Atari was also pioneering something else back in the day, and that was their line of 8-bit home PC computers. So today I'm going to be taking a look at one of those computers, the Atari 800XL, and we'll take a look at that today. The Atari 800XL came out in 1983 and was preloaded with 64K of RAM. So it made it a good competitor towards the Commodore 64. Now it also came preloaded with BASIC, preloaded into the computer's memory or RAM, and it came with a help button on the side of the keyboard, so that way if you got lost in certain programs, instead of just trying to fight your way through the complicated programming language, you could actually get little help screens that would teach you different commands in case you forgot them. Now you could also get for the computer a 2600 compatible joystick, and Atari had its own version of DOS that was completely separate from DOS that you would see on other IBM PC Junior and compatibles, but for overall was pretty compatible with most of their software at the time. There was also the Atari 1050 floppy disk drive that read 5 1/4 discs, the Atari 1010 cassette drive, which ran its own version of BASIC, known as Cassette Basic, and this was a much cheaper option for people who couldn't afford the 1050 drive, because cassettes back then were very cheap and you could overwrite programs on them, but they were a lot more complicated to use and didn't always get the same quality that you did off of the floppy disks. And along with other peripherals, you could also get the Atari 1027 printer, which was a dot matrix printer and printed out very nicely. Unfortunately, mine powers on, but it doesn't print anything because the printing reel is all worn down. And the Atari 800XL has the power on-off switch and a spot for the power in DC adapter, the channel 2, channel 3 selector switch, a yellow cable port for the switch box, which you can also use RGB cables for, a separate port for the monitor, a parallel bus for hooking up printers and other such extensions, and the main peripheral switch, which is how you hook up all of your drives and printers to the system. Okay, now that we've got the Atari 800XL all set up, I'll show you one of the many ways in which you can boot up the computer. We'll first start off by turning on the television here. And I have the Atari hooked up via the yellow video cable. Now this way of booting it up would be if you didn't have a disk drive or a cassette drive or anything else. This would just be booting off of the Atari's internal memory. So we'll flip the switch here. And the computer does a self-check. And I don't know if you can see or not, but on the screen here it says ready with a cursor prompt. Now what that means is it's telling you that the computer is ready to go, that this has loaded up BASIC internally. And what BASIC is it's a programming language that allows you to write word processing programs, or to program games or documents or spreadsheets and things like that. So this is basically telling you the computer's all ready to go. And it's called BASIC because it's a very basic language that you use to communicate with the computer. Now you can get into the self-test menu if you just type in buy, and this will bring up the self-test menu. Now what this does is this allows you to test anything if you're having a problem with the computer, like you can test the memory. And you select it here with the select button. And we'll go here to the memory test. And this will actually run through testing the ROM and the RAM, and all the little bars will fill up from white to green to let you know whether or not there's any bad sectors of RAM, and maybe you need to take it into a dealer to have it serviced. So we're not going to go through that now, so we'll just back out of this. You also have the audio visual test here. And And this just tests the audio and visual output of the computer. So that way you know that when you're playing games, if you don't have any sound, you could run this test. And there's also the keyboard test. And this just basically, once you hit a key, you see the corresponding key on the monitor light up. Okay, so we're done with that. And now that we're done with this, you might have noticed that when you get back to the main screen, once the computer boots up, you have no DOS. There's no operating system. If I put in C backslash, it just comes up with an error. It doesn't know what that is. Computers at this time, they rarely had hard drives. This does have the BASIC preloaded in it, so this was one of the earliest hard drives, even though it barely had any memory at all. So now if you wanted to load something other than BASIC onto your computer, you'd have to do one of two things. Now in order to do that, we're going to have to turn the computer off, and then we'll turn on the 1050 drive. And here I have an Atari 2.5 version of Atari DOS. So we'll go and load that up. Put that into your click. The drive will work. You have to wait for the red light to go off. That lets you know that it's accepted the disk. And now what this will do when you turn the power button on, you have to make sure you do it in this order, is instead of booting from the computer's memory, it'll actually boot from the disk. And you can hear the drive whirring and clicking as it's loaded the data. And now you still see the ready prompt. Now what you would do here is you type in DOS, and this brings up the Disk Utilities 1983 Atari version 2.6F of Atari DOS modified for Atari 800 use. Definitely not Windows 10. And this gives you a whole bunch of different options here to where you can check the disk directory. They're labeled A through T, so as many options as you have, you would label them alphabetically. And we can do A here. And it's saying directory search specific list or files. We just want to do all, so we're going to do the asterisk here, the little dot, and enter. And that'll access the drive, and that tells me that all that's on this drive is the DOS system file and the duplicate system file. So that allows you to make a backup copy of DOS, because back in the day, these disks, they got ruined very easily, and if you destroyed that data, they were gone forever. So there's a lot of different things that you can do on here, where you could lock files or unlock files. Like let's say if I wanted to lock the duplicate file, I'd hit F, enter, and now it's going to ask me what file I want to lock, so I'm going to type in dupsys, and what this actually does is when you go to look up the directory, what you should see now is that there should be a little asterisk next to the dupsys. So what that means is if somebody tries to format the drive, that file's write protected. It won't allow that to be deleted. So that's very, very important on these disks where DOS is the only way that you're able to really boot something up. Now, you see the menu goes up, so if you type in too many commands where it goes up all the way, you just hit return and it refreshes the screen. You can also check the drive speed on this. And now the drives are indicated by hitting D1, D2, or D3. And it would run through this test for a few minutes, and there we are. It's actually faster than I thought. It says the disk drive speed of this is 284 RPMs, which is pretty good for 1983. We'll go back to the main menu. You can delete files on here. You can copy files. You can write DOS duplicate, which is your system information. binary save, binary load, which that actually loads programs by how they're numbered on the disk. There's a create mem.save function, which is very important. Usually on most disks that you start up like this, you want to do that. So we'll hit N, and it's asking, do we want to create the mem.save? Now what mem.save does is when you're running in BASIC, if you would turn off the computer or go to another program, you would lose everything that you had saved in BASIC, which I'll show you a simple program on that in just a second. So what this does is it creates kind of like a bookmark, so that way it saves your place in BASIC, and you can flip back and forth between your DOS menu and your BASIC. So we're going to go and hit yes to create the mem.save, and that'll write that to the disk. All right. And then in order to get back to BASIC, you could just type in by DOS or by, and that'll bring you right back to the BASIC screen. All right, so now I want to show you guys another way of loading up some DOS and BASIC programs. So I have another disk already loaded into the drive here. And we'll boot that up and turn the volume up here. And this one has a program called Auto Run already loaded into it, so it should automatically go right into the main submenu. See the ready prompt comes up here. There we go, and this is one that I had in a box of discs that I have, which is pretty neat, called the Pico Computer Club. So this is actually like really cool, like somebody back in the 80s. You know, I don't know if that's Pico, like it's probably a school, but I don't know if it's like the same thing as the electric company, but it's pretty neat. Sorry to ramble on there. So this has a whole bunch of different programs, some that I program myself, and others that are programmed by people from a long time ago. So now, what you can also do with discs, which is a really neat little thing here, with the 5 1/4, they have notches on each side, so that makes it a double density disk, so there's other games and programs on the other side. So we'll flip this over here, and we'll load up the software on the other side. And the funny thing is that even though you could record on discs like that, people really didn't know about it, and so it was kind of one of those things that just kind of got found out. Like companies didn't really want people knowing you could record on both sides, because then they would sell less software. All right, so we'll hit enter again to refresh the menu, and that brings up the other stuff on the other screen. And I'm going to play a game here called Sub-Attack, which is pretty cool. So we'll hit run here to run the program, and we'll hit 13. And you see I have my Atari 2600 controller all set up here. There we go. And then we'll have that run. And it'll take a minute or two for it to load up. And as you can see, the screen is populating. This is like the loading screen, all the different boats and stuff. All right, there we go. And so this is the main screen here, and now the object of the game is you control a submarine down at the bottom. It kind of looks like a little dolphin, which I just got blown up there. And you have 3 lives, and you have to avoid mines that fall from the surface of the ocean, and then shoot your missiles up at the top to try and blow up the battleships and destroyers up top, and you want to try to time them just right. And you have bigger battleships and destroyers, and you can move around all over the place. And it's pretty cool that somebody programmed this, because it's from, there's a lot of books where you can do your own basic programs. So a program like this, That's probably a couple thousand lines of code. So that probably took, I would say, 4 to 6 hours to code this. And not even just thinking if you had to write the code yourself and know what everything means. I mean, you're talking a minimum of like 2 weeks to know all the different commands and things like that. But you know, it's pretty cool that somebody was able to do this themselves. There we go. Game over. Didn't do that great. All right, so now we'll reboot this up again, back to the main menu. And we'll let this load up DOS. There we go, and now I'll show you another way in how you can load up different programs and games. Now, DOS isn't loaded per se in here. You can go back to it, but it doesn't have the auto run program loaded on the B side of the disk. But another way that you can read and write programs is via cassettes. So I have a cassette here that I already have some programs that I programmed on to it. We'll put it into the cassette player here. And now in order to load from the cassette drive, because they're all piggybacked off of one another, you would type in cload. You have to have the volume up pretty high in order to hear the prompt. And then you would hit enter. And then you would hit play on the cassette player and hit play again, return again on the keyboard. And what that does is it sends an audio signal to the monitor, which you can probably hear. You can hear that high screech in the background. It's actually taken the noises from the cassette with the sound, and it's processing that into an actual computer file. Turn that down a little bit. Okay, now it says that it's ready, so it's done loading. We'll hit pause on the cassette player. And now this is what some basic commands look like. We'll type list, and you can see this is the code that people write where it says 25 print, 30 print, go to 110, 100 print. And these are commands for the computer and its stored RAM on how to position little dots and things on the screen and to tell it to move the cursor over or left and right and things like that. So now that it's loaded, we'll type run, and we'll get that little audio prompt again. And we'll unpause it and hit return. And that'll finish loading the rest of the program fully into the ROM of the computer. So yeah, while I'm waiting for that to load, yeah, BASIC was a very complicated language back in the 80s to program. It would probably take someone a good year in college to really figure out how to program a simple game, even like this, with Hangman. So a lot of people had these computers at their homes, but they really didn't know how to use them. So you would get books like this that would have basic programs already in it, and then you could write your own programs and make it useful for home use. Because beyond that, without having an operating system like MS-DOS or Windows, computers during the early 80s were really nothing more than just giant word processors and video game consoles. They didn't really serve any other purpose than that. And there we go. So now you can select your difficulty level here. And then we're going to pick beginner. And use the controller to pick different letters. You know, obviously Hangman, here we go. Only one vowel so far, alright. Looks like he died. I'll try it again here. Let's see if we can get him this time. I think I got this one figured out here. There we go, computer. So you can see that's how simple programs like that you can run on from a cassette or a basic cartridge. Alright, so now I'm going to go back to the main menu here. Alright. And now another way that you can also load up programs on the Atari 800XL is there were a lot of cartridges that also came with it. So we'll take a few here. I have a bunch here. Let's see where I have it at. Like this is Atari Writer. So we'll reset the computer and let it reload. There we are. We'll let it load DOS. There we are. We'll put the cartridge in. And hit reset. There we are. And now this is a word processing program, so you can create a file and you can basically do exactly what you can do today in like MS Word and things like that. There we go. And now that we're done with that, we can save that. There we go. Now let's save my little file to the disk drive. And if I wanted to load that back up, just do the same thing. And there it is, loaded back up on the screen. Now you can also do this with other cartridges. And you can play regular games right from the Atari 800. And they played really well too, like this is Centipede. And honestly plays really good. I mean, considering this only came out a few years after the Atari 2600, the graphics and sound are just so much more improved. This is almost at Atari 7800 to 5200 quality, and in my opinion, it's really, really close to arcade quality. This is really, really good graphics and sound for, you know, a computer computer with only a few bytes of RAM. Now, aside from Centipede, I also have some other games on here to give you an idea of what it's capable of. One of my favorites that I had, and was probably our only game growing up as a kid, I have PacMan here, and this is a really, really good port. Which looks like that did not load up correctly. Sometimes it doesn't. Why is that not loading correctly? Something's wrong with the cartridge here. There we go. And this is a really excellent version of PacMan. I mean, when you consider that for the 2600, I mean, that was an absolute abomination. And this, like, you can tell all the different ghosts apart, and the sound effects are there. Yeah, this is just light years ahead of its time. And as close as you were possibly able to get to the arcade experience in your home. Yeah, this right here for 1983, this is better than ColecoVision or television graphics. So I never really understood why Atari didn't pursue its home PC line more than it did. And this is a lot of fun. I'm actually a lot better at this version of PacMan than I am the 2600 or even the 7800. And another fun game on here that's kind of uncommon to find, called Gyrus, and that plays really good as well. 1984, and this really shows off what the XL is capable of. I mean, you have really good music here, really good graphics. There's no slowdown or lag. So there's that. Just reset back to regular basic here. All right, and now to show you a little bit about like some simple basic programming. If you wanted to write a program of your own, you could just type in a command like 10, and you would type in print Brian loves Atari, exclamation point, 20, go to 10, 30, end. So there, any type of number from like multiples of like 10 through like pretty much infinity that you can program with. Hit enter to save it, and then run. And it'll constantly print that on the screen until you hit break, telling it that you don't want to do it anymore. And then if you wanted to save this to a cassette, you would type in csave. Let me flip it over so I don't miss anything on that side. And you would hit enter here. There we go. And then it would record the program, and once the audio prompt was done, that's how you would know that the computer is done sending the program to the cassette. So yeah, your ears really took a beating back in the day when you were using a cassette program like that. So it's always important to have all of your things that you have on cassette, have them numbered and filed. Like this is an official game I have for the Atari 400 800 called Sea Dragon, but unfortunately this goes up to the loading screen, but it doesn't actually really load. So I think there's something actually wrong with the cassette. Alright guys, well I hope you enjoyed taking a look at the Atari 800 XL with me today. I hope you learned a little bit something about the basic programming and what this little machine is capable of. So I'll see you back here again for another retro recap. Take care guys.
Hey guys, if you liked the video that you just watched, go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below. And if you do the Facebook or Twitter thing, follow me at #KingOfRetro. See you next time.